Hello, my friend, and welcome to this two-part series on a call to leadership. I'm Dr. Nate Salah, your host. I am so glad you are here. If you're a father and you've had trouble in the space of dadding, and I know I have, whether it's been through the trials we've faced as parents or the trials we've faced as children of parents, this episode will be life-giving. I've invited a dear friend of mine, Mr. Scott Reed, who has recently written a book called The Power of a Dad. And it is so encouraging, inspiring, deep with wisdom. He's going to share some of his principles that have guided him in this world and continue to help men, fathers, become the dad that they are called to be. Can't wait for you to listen in. This is a call to leadership. Mentorship in this space of fatherhood. How important is that, and how do we manifest it?
Wow, yeah, mentorship to our sons. I think there are, unfortunately, I think a lot of dads that do that obedience first, and to just explain more about what I used to tell you, and I actually wrote about that in the raising chapter of this book too, but that we were the kind of parents, and thankfully Holly and I had unity. I know there's a lot of parents out there that do not agree on how to raise kids, and that is an extremely difficult place. And I have a lot of compassion for parents that don't agree. Thankfully, Holly and I had a lot of unity, and we would just say to the boys, when we'd ask them to do something that they didn't understand and they wanted to talk about it or argue or push back, we would simply say, here's what I need you to do. I want you to obey and do it, and then we'll talk about it. When it comes to this idea of mentorship, this is a whole nother thing, a whole nother level of that. Unfortunately, there are the dads that demand obedience and demand respect. And yet we all are hypocrites on some level. We all have things that we say we are and we don't actually totally fulfill. So it's in all of us. But dads will demand respect, demand obedience, and yet they do not live in a way that their sons and daughters can grow up watching and saying, boy, I want to be like my dad in that area, or I wish I was more like him in this or that. And that issue alone, that hypocrisy issue, I think derails our ability to mentor our kids and to truly raise them in a way where it's like, look, I'm further. The way I describe it in the book is I'm further up the mountain, or I'm further up the rock climb than you, and I have a perspective you don't have. And so when I tell you, hey, grab that handhold, or grab this handhold, or that's a slippery piece of footing right there, be careful, you're going to trust me because you see my life, right? But if we as dads are not pursuing mentors ourselves and being poured into by wise men and women, by leaders in our lives that we place ourselves under because we want to grow and we want to get further up the mountain too, our kids are not going to want to follow. And our kids are not going to accept any mentorship from someone that they do not see striving and growing and wanting to be better and wanting to learn. So part of the best way I mentor the boys is I show them my scars all the time. Hey boys, let me tell you about when I was your age and some ways I majorly screwed up. And I apologize to them all the time when I overreact and when I was too hard on them for no good reason. Like, dude, I came down on you way harder than I needed to on that. You deserve some correction, but not like I gave it to you. My voice was raised. That was short. It was bad. Man, I think if you ask my boys, they would probably say the things that they admired and the most, but potentially about me, was that I'm just very man, I screwed that up royally, and I want to do better than that. They watched me as a dad trying to get better, and so it makes them want to try to get better. So I'd say from a mentor standpoint, That's the sauce in my life.
Yeah, man. And I think, someone listening is thinking that through because it, we often think that apologizing or admitting when we've missed it is weakness. And I think
Right.
it's really just the opposite. Man, it's the pinnacle of true strength.
Yeah.
And what we say, meekness is not weakness, it's power under control. Or I love the way Dr. Peterson puts it is swords sheathed. Uh,
Mm,
and and it's difficult at first, I think. And for me, the same sort of philosophy is, look, hey, I was too harsh there. This is not the way I meant to say it. I said it that way, and I know it's
mm,
hurtful. Let me rephrase that. And
yep.
and and giving our children an example
Mm,
of number one, to walk in that humility. Two, to own our mistakes. Three, to own the correction of our errors. And then four, I doubt any of our children would ever say, boy, dad was so weak when he actually admitted that he missed it. No,
no
the
way.
opposite. Like, dad, thank
Yes.
you.
Mm,
I mean, thank you, right? I mean, that's
mm,
like and it's a connection. It's a deeper connection in the relationship. So if you're listening and this has perhaps been a struggle, man, take the first step in a quiet place and say, hey, whether it was yesterday, whether it was last week, whether it was last year,
mm.
there's no moratorium. There's no statute of limitations
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
on making things right, on
yeah,
reconciliation.
yeah. There's a story, Nate. I didn't write it in the book, but it just happened to me. There was a dad and I connecting after years. It was at like a high school reunion. It was 25, 30 years. And we had had a rough start where he was kind of like a bully to me early on. And then we became really good buddies. And I'm standing there and he's got two young daughters. And I say to him, I said, how cool is this, man? That you and I are standing here. We're good friends. We have such respect for each other. And yet you used to be such a jerk to me. And I said this and we're laughing, right? And he's like in early high school and middle school or whatever. You remember those times you were so, whatever. And we laughed. I thought, well, he eventually reached out to me, disappointed his girls were when they heard that news from that their dad had been kind of mean to somebody in high school. And I said, well, but I said, have you never talked to your girls about how you were mean to some people in high school? I mean, who wasn't mean to people in high school? Like you've never talked to your daughters about how you were mean. And he's like, nope. And they were so disappointed. And I actually kind of had a good moment with him where I was like, buddy, you got to fix that. Like, that's not on me or anyone else. You need to show some scars here, because if your daughters don't think you did anything wrong in high school, if your daughters don't ever feel like you messed up, then when they mess up, they're certainly not coming to you with that. They're going to keep that quiet or go somewhere else. Or like, you showing scars to your kids are are the open door for that. When they mess up, they know that dad's a safe place. So I just
Mm,
encouraging anyone listening.
yes.
I know it feels like weakness at times, but showing your scars is a huge, huge gift to your kids.
Yeah, and you do it appropriately with age appropriateness
Yes,
and circumstances, and having the conversation with your spouse perhaps around different things if you
sure,
have that opportunity. And I found the same thing, and there's still things I haven't told Abram yet. And
sure.
look, man, I was in a lot of trouble when I when I was young. I mean, just about everything I did was wrong. So I didn't want, I don't want to overload him with all, but it is important. It's important to reveal that, look, life isn't perfect. It's messy. And I've had challenges. And here's the thing, just because I've made errors and I've got scars and I've shared them with you doesn't mean that you're going to have a life either that is straight and narrow. You're gonna
Right.
you're gonna veer off from time to time, and
Sure.
perhaps some of the decisions you make will have consequences that weren't what you intended.
Mm,
I love you.
mm.
God loves you. That doesn't change the promise.
Yeah, yeah, that's
It
right.
doesn't change the
So
promise.
good.
Now here's
So good.
something you mentioned earlier, and I we have to talk about this because
Okay.
this is an Achilles heel for many dads and has been for this dad as well. Dads get busy. Dads
Yeah.
want to provide. We are
Mm,
focused on making a provision for our family, and perhaps our full present life isn't as present as we would hope. In fact, I was just watching. There was a program on TV last night, and I wasn't watching the whole thing, but it was about the wrestlers back in the '90s,
mm,
the WWF, and all that. And there was an interview of a daughter of a wrestler, and she was talking about her dad. And this is a common theme. She was talking not just wrestlers, but just busy dads. And her eyes start welling up in the interview, and she's talking about how much she loved her dad, that he was gone 300 days out of the year. And she just wished she could have time.
mm.
Man, it hits hard.
Yeah, man. Yeah. And I know a lot of dads carry a lot of guilt about that. And man, oof, I have no words to say that fix that at all. And I don't even have a good solution to that. Again, this is a complicated thing being a dad. What I know to be true though, by just so many conversations with adult children like you and me, the thing that leaves the biggest mark in our lives is presence. Those men, those dad hearts. Hopefully, it was our dad, but if we didn't have a dad around, hopefully it was those dad hearts that just knew how to be with us and to listen and to go through experiences with us without trying to solve something or give us advice or working on something or doing something fun. And that's a hard thing too for dads, realizing that like, okay, they do get a little time off, so let's do a bunch of fun stuff. And like, let's be really busy with fun stuff all day. And sometimes our kids just want to be. Do you know some of the greatest connections I ever had with my oldest son, Tommy, was on our drive across country from Chicago to college 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago. It was the most profound time of connection we'd ever had before. And we weren't doing anything for hours. We weren't doing anything but sitting and waiting and listening and having conversations, talking about music and how have you heard this song? And it was just together time. And that's a superpower. And I think the sad thing is that there were so many dads that maybe were even home a lot. We're home for dinners often. We're home in their offices or working, but they were always busy doing something productive. And you talk to a lot of their adult children, and they would say things like, and I say this in the book, they would unfortunately say things like, my dad wasn't around much. And that would break dad's heart because he's like, what are you talking about? I was home all the time, right? But in their minds, the things they remember, dad wasn't really there. Maybe he was in the other room, but he wasn't really there. So I just say things like, I threw out a few just ideas like, do you know what makes your kids laugh? Do you know what some of their big dreams are? And if you do, awesome, you're doing it. Like this is great. You're making great progress. Um, but if some of those questions I pose in the book are difficult to answer, it's probably because there's just a challenge with you knowing how to just really be with and not necessarily do. And man, you talk about the connections that is with us and the Lord, right? So often I think the Lord, our Father, just wants us to just be and stop doing so much for Him or in His name or like, just like, can we just be together?
Right.
And man, that's a hard one for us dads, especially for dads that have a lot going on. Multiple businesses, multiple things. It's like this is challenging. And I would just say to somebody like you, Nate, that you juggle a lot of things, but I believe about you because I know your nature and your character. But I believe that when you're with Abram, he knows you are. really there. Your mind is with him, your heart is with him, your time is with him, and that is what he's going to remember more than anything that you guys did together. You know.
Received. Yeah, that fully present father is so important to uh, eliminate the distractions.
Mm,
And we live in a very distracted world, whether it's
hmm
the phone or the computer or whatever is on our mind. And it takes quite the discipline to begin to develop those habits. I mean,
hmm
I'll be fully transparent. I remember times where my wife would say, "I need your undivided attention,"
Oh
and
yeah.
I would even tell her times, "You when you need it, tell me." And then I'm like, "What a buffoon!" Like you have to tell your wife to alert you when she deserves your full attention. No, no. It is yours because it's it's what's right. It's what's right is that you. By the way, to be undivided is to be whole, and
Mm,
we share that same language with the word integrity. Right? To have integrity is to be whole, to be
yeah.
undivided, to be unbroken. We breach the integrity of a hull of a ship. What happens? The ship sinks. And I think that
Mm,
also speaks to our integrity as a father is to be whole and undivided, even in our minds, in the moment with our children. And again, look, like you said, we're all guilty as charged. There's moments where the mind will wander, or you'll have something that is you'll be reading an email or whatever it is. It's not what happened in the past. It's what can happen today
yeah.
and tomorrow and next week.
Yep.
We have choices. And even in my own walk with Abram, same as you, and some of our best times have been on a road trip
Mm,
and just us in a car, stopping at a gas station, getting a whole pizza and just driving and talking. And it might take hours before things start to unwind. And then the real questions start coming in.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then you can get a little deeper
Yep.
and really start tilling that soil of life together.
hmm hmm Yeah, I talked about my dad. I have a great dad, and he was busy. He worked a lot, but man, he was so good at just being. And I that's where kind of the inspiration for that idea came from. Is that he just knew how to. When I was sick, he would. No one was better at just being by the bed than my dad. Even if he was working on something, and when I'd roll over or wake up, he's ready. You know, it's like we always knew Dad was available at any moment, and even with a busy schedule. And I so admired that, and I want to be that kind of dad myself. You know.
Well, and I'm thankful for that. And for every dad story, there's a dad story that is like yours that has that richness of relationship. And then
Mm,
there's other dad stories, kind of like mine, where I had three dads and two stepdads and a biological dad, and I didn't have a lot of time in the saddle with any one of them.
mm, mm,
And the thing about whether you're on the preserved side of fatherhood, or that you have been in this space of you get to author a better future and with your children, uh, either way, they're the choices we make. And I believe, based on what you had said earlier, and I don't want to lose this thought that you had mentioned, our direction as fathers informs our children. It informs
mm,
our children whether or not that this is a journey that is valuable, that's impactful, that's relevant to them. And so, it's election cycle, right? People are making decisions on who they're going to choose to follow. And I tend to find that people at least subconsciously ask at minimum two questions when they're looking for leadership that's worthy to be followed. Number one, do they know where they're going?
mm.
Two, do I want to go there?
Yeah,
Right?
that's good. That's good.
And so with our kids, they're asking the same questions. And where are we going? Well, let's look at where we are devoting our time to.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
is it? And that devotion of time is a
Mm,
message. It sends a beacon to our children to say, here's where I'm going. Whether or not you verbalize it, it's irrelevant. It's your actions that
Mm,
determine your destination,
dang, yeah.
and
So good,
they've got to
Nate.
make a decision. So,
Yep.
and they will judge us based on whether or not it is important to them. And so, boy,
Mm,
and spending really, and so that time of evaluation in our own lives, like take an inventory.
yeah, man.
Where am I going? Who am I
Yeah.
following? Where am I devoting my energy and my resources? How am I responding to my, if you're married, how am I responding to my
Yep.
spouse?
Oh, you better believe they're watching that. Greatest gift you can give sons and daughters is a healthy marriage. You know, we Holly and I feel that 100%, and we know there's a lot of broken homes, and there's reconciliation and redemption that the Lord has for all of us available. But you know, you said something that, first of all, that's so well said, Nate. I love that. Where are you going, and do I want to go there? That's such a great dad mentor. That was back to that mentoring thing we talked about. But let me say to you, your life is exactly probably why I was writing this book, and I really felt the Holy Spirit charged me to write this book. You obviously, because you had three dads, bounced around, never felt that security from a dad heart, at least in the home. I know for a fact that God, in his kindness to you, because he did it to me, he did it to Holly, so many broken families, that he did this same thing. He sent men into your life. I know it. You and I have never talked about this, but I know it because of the fruit of your life. He sent wonderful men into your life at critical points as a little boy growing up, high school, college, whatever, that you can probably think of right now. Two or three of them probably that are really important, that had a dad heart for you, that saw you, that called you up, that instilled things in you that you did not learn from biological dad or foster dad or whatever. Uh, these, and we call them, Holly and I call those surrogate dads, and we get to be surrogate mom and dad here in LA to orphan, spiritually orphaned, biologically orphaned 20s, 30 somethings in Los Angeles. It's such a privilege. But I know you, Nate, because of the fruit of your life, had these incredible men that poured into you at critical moments. And they probably don't even realize it, some of them. And that's what I'm saying to all dads. Look, men, please open your eyes to the opportunity all around you to love sons and daughters that really need a dad heart. Even if they've got a dad, they really need a good dad heart. And so you and I could talk for a long time about your stories, but I guarantee you can think of some men that were that for you.
Absolutely. Without a doubt. Yeah. And
Yeah,
and and, and
that's
walking
awesome.
in that gratitude for that
Yeah.
influence, even if it's unspoken through the relationships, it's manifested in the fruit that it bears. And turning around and
Mm-hmm.
being that as you move forward. And as you know this, Scott, it's sometimes it's just a word straight from the Spirit
Yep.
that you may not even remember, but it's implanted deep.
Yep.
And so being that source of wisdom and inspiration and and really identifying that, man, I have a place in this world that is of importance to this next generation that so desperately need a dad heart.
Mm-hmm.
And and this is maybe we've got to have more conversations later about this subject. That is that's a place that many of us perhaps haven't fully addressed, but your encouragement and your challenge um, is not only timely uh, but inspires.
Mm.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Before we go, though, I have a
Yeah.
final question for you.
All right.
I sometimes pose to my wonderful guests. One day, as a dad, as a husband, as a man who has lived this side of the journey before he moves on to the other side of eternity, we'll see that great summit. You'll be on that final stage, and you'll look at all of the things and the people that you impacted
Mm.
over all of these years. What is one thing that you would want them to have said about you?
Oh man, that's such a great question. Um, I more than anything, and I have a head start on this one because I had to think about that for truly like the last sentence of this book. But I would want people to say of me, boy, he really loved his wife well. Um, you and I both know we haven't talked about marriage much. We've talked about dating, but no, nothing, no relationship is more difficult. Takes more humility and is more wonderfully and beautifully chaotic and spectacular all at the same time than marriage. And I want people to say he really loved Holly well, and that he was a great dad, that he um, laid his life down for Ephesians 5:25. That husbands love your wives as Christ loved the church, who gave himself up for her. It's this picture of a man laying himself out to where, and so many of us as men, again, that feels like weakness, and it feels like no, that puts me in too much of a vulnerable spot where if people wanted to walk on me, no one walks on me, right? Men want to say stuff like that, and Jesus was saying, no, that's exactly where I'm laying. If people choose to walk on me, they do, but I am laying my life down for the people I love. And God, Jesus called us, Paul's writings called us to love our wives like that. And I believe love our children like that. No greater love than to lay your life down for your wife and your kids and your brothers and your sisters. And so that would be the thing I'd want said of me. He really loved his family well. He loved people well. He loved the Lord with all of his heart. I mean, no greater headstone could be than that. So,
Well, you are well
mm.
on your way, brother.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you
Thank
for
you, man.
being here. I guess the marriage one's going to have to be our next round. I think I've
Let's
heard
do
it.
that.
So good to have
Let's
you.
do that. You too, brother. Bless you, man.